There are three parts to a relative clause. The first part is the antecedent. It means the word that falls before. It answers the question, who's the who, or what's the what. So for example, if you're in the sentence, the boy who lives next door collects stamps. Who? The boy. So the boy is the who. It's the antecedent. The second part of a relative clause is the relative pronoun. In English, that would be who, which, whose, whom, and sometimes that. In Latin, that would be the pronoun qui, quae, quod. Q-U-O-D. And there are various forms of that. The relative pronoun introduces a relative clause. We'll talk about the clause in a second. Let's first find the pronoun in our sentence we're using. The boy who lives next door collects stamps. Who is your relative pronoun? Now we talk about the relative clause. The relative clause provides information about the antecedent. And it usually ends with a verb in Latin. But not always. So let's look at our sample sentence again. The boy who lives next door collects stamps. So we know this is our relative pronoun, so this is the beginning. Now in Latin, it would go usually to the next verb. But in English, it's just the extra phrase. So the boy who lives next door collects stamps. Which boy? The boy who lives next door. So I've underlined my relative clause. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to create like a little key to help us remember what's what. So I'm going to highlight the word antecedent in yellow. So every time we find our antecedent, it'll be yellow. I'm going to highlight the relative pronoun in green. And then I'll underline every relative clause. Here we go. So let's start with our sample sentence. The boy is in yellow. Remember in Latin, there's no word for the, so it would just be included in the word. Who is our relative pronoun? Got that in green. And then I underlined the relative clause. Remember, relative clauses always start with relative pronouns. So once you find that, you found the beginning of the clause, which is pretty awesome. So let's start looking at our sentences. I saw the Queen who rules Great Britain. So let's find our antecedent first. Who's the who? It's the Queen. So we'll highlight her in yellow. The relative pronoun is who here, pretty simplistic. And that starts our relative clause. And the extra information is who rules Great Britain. And there we go. Let's continue. The boy whose book I have is our friend. So now we're answering again the question, who's the who? It's the boy. He's our antecedent. We keep that in yellow. Whose is a relative pronoun. And then let's work out, I left off that E. Let's underline the relative clause. The boy whose book I have is our friend. The boy is our friend is the main clause. Whose book I have is your relative clause, or what we call a subordinate clause. Remember, a subordinate clause just means it's not as important as the main clause, so it's subordinate. Let's continue on. You saw the man to whom I gave the book. To whom? Who's the whom? It's the man. Then to whom is your relative clause. And then to whom I gave the book. So there you go. Now why don't you take a few moments to go ahead and do this on your own. Meanwhile, I'll be doing it on the screen, so you can pause the video if you like and then check the answers. So those are the answers. Remember, again, the yellow represents the antecedent, the green, the relative pronoun, and the underline is, of course, the relative clause. Now let's go ahead and try this in the Latin forms. So you have your first sentence, vidi reginam quae Britanniam regit. First thing we want to do is try to go ahead and translate the sentence. So vidi is I saw, reginam is the queen, quae is who, regit is rules, and then Britanniam is just what you think, it's Britanniam. All right, so now that we've got that information, let's just use the English to help us out in the Latin. So who's the who? The queen is your antecedent. Quae is your relative pronoun. And then it starts the relative clause. Now remember, in the beginning of the notes, I told you that a relative clause usually ends with a verb. Most of the time you see that it's an exception when you have a verb of being in the actual relative clause. But for right now, we're good. We have a regular verb. Let's do the next sentence. The boy whose book I have is our friend. The word our is actually no stare, just so you guys know. Shouldn't have underlined that. Messes up our underlining for later. But anyway, let's continue. All right, so who's the whose? It's the boy. He's our antecedent. Cujus, which means whose, is our relative pronoun. So we're going to start there. Whose book I have. Habeo is have, so you go to there. And there you go. Why don't you go ahead and try 3, 4, 5, and 6 on your own. Pause the video. And then when you're ready, come back on and you'll see the answers. I'll be doing them right now. You see here you've got the word quibuscum. Quibuscum is actually, please don't underline weary, by the way. Quibuscum is actually the word cum and quibus. Romans tend to like to take this and just cram it on the end of this. So it means with whom. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you could say it takes cum and then just crams it on the end of quibus. So it just means with whom. So that's why you got quibuscum. Remember, don't underline weary. Start with quibuscum and go through pugnabatus. All right, so here you go. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm also going to go ahead really quickly and make the chart that you need in order to have all the relative pronouns. So we'll just go ahead, start making our chart. The top part's going to be the singular, the bottom part's going to be the plural. Remember, as always, the three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. You have nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative for your cases. Down here is going to be the plural. And the genders will just continue down to the bottom of the page. All right, so it's going to go qui, quai, quad. You can also say quode if you want. That's okay. Then cuius, all the way across. Cuius, cuius. Qui goes all the way across as well. Qui, qui. Quem, quam, quad or quode. Quo with a long mark. Qua with a long mark. And then quo again. So those are your singulars. Okay, at the bottom, you have qui, quai, quai, quorum, quorum, quorum. Then you do quibus all the way across. Quos, quos, and then qui down here because of the rules of the neuter. And then quibus, quibus, quibus. All right, wonderful. So if you have any questions, just let me know.